Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started in just about a minute or so. So go ahead and grab your cup of coffee and let's get ready to talk about non-congregate shelter. So we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is the listening session for the public comment period for the notices of funding for the HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter application and the supportive services application. Both have been released on our website. And so at dca.georgia, spelled out, .gov. So let's go ahead and move on to the next piece. Just know that this session is going to be, or is recorded. It's recording right now. And it will be posted to our YouTube page later on this week. The PowerPoint will be available as well. And so, and that'll be on the website for HOME-ARP with the link to the NOFO page as well. Please ask questions throughout. Just raise your hand or use the chat, preferably. And actually, while I'm saying that, while Jody gets started, I'll go ahead and shift the audio settings to allow us to have conversations. And then the listening session is going to end at 12:30, but we're going to be continuing to view the public input survey submissions through the close of business this Friday. So that's just know that we have a form up that you can access the form up that you can basically have a way to communicate with us about your questions. And then any application submission issues, please email me and we will help you move through that. So the agenda today is we're going to be first reviewing and commenting on the non-congregate shelter notice of funding opportunity. And then we're going to take time to review and comment on the supportive services notice of funding opportunity and any additional thoughts. And also, I think we probably should introduce ourselves now that I'm thinking about it. My name is Ilona Nagy, and I am the HOME-ARP manager. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jody to introduce herself, and then Candace.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jody Key, and I'm a HOME-ARP specialist.
Candace? Good morning. I'm Candace Spicer, and I'm a HOME-ARP specialist as well.
Hey, thanks, guys. So we're going to move on to non-congregate shelter. And Jody, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good deal. So, non-congregate shelter, for the purposes of HOME-ARP, is defined as one or more buildings that provide private rooms or rooms for temporary shelter that also have a lockable door and a private bathroom. They serve individuals and families that meet one or more of the qualifying populations, and they do not require occupants to sign a lease or occupancy agreement. The caveat is operating costs of non-congregate shelter are not eligible under this funding opportunity. Eligible applicants and activities. Eligible applicants are those nonprofits with a 501c3 or 4 with tax exempt status, serving citizens, or a city or county government in Georgia. Eligible activities are new construction, acquisition, and or rehab of a non-congregate shelter. And for the purposes of acquisition or rehab, a lot of some of the examples given are like an old motel or an old nursing home. For the purposes of new construction of non-congregate shelter, you can acquire vacant land to build a new congregate shelter, and the demolition of existing structures to build a new non-congregate shelter. The NOFO overview. Projects awarded under this NOFO will be eligible to receive a funding award in the form of a cost reimbursement grant for the new construction of a non-congregate shelter or acquisition and or rehab of existing structures, and again, such as motels and nursing homes, to be converted into non-congregate shelter. An optional supportive services funding award in the form of a cost reimbursement grant to support housing stability for qualifying populations in the non-congregate shelter, which must be spent by January 1st, 2030. And a cost reimbursement grant requires project owners to pay for costs associated with the project upfront and allows DCA to reimburse these expenses on documentation submitted, such as invoices, receipts, and a draw request form. Some of the financial considerations are projects must adequately plan for the long-term financial and physical health of the property. Applications must reflect adequate sources of financing to operate the non-congregate shelter throughout the duration of the compliance period. And during review, DCA will consider the following priorities: your maximum application request and the history of your shelter operation. Are there any questions thus far on this section? Any areas that we need to be sure to keep in this section of the NOFO?
Quick
Does
question.
anyone? Go ahead.
My name is Latine George, would be assistant chosen vessel. I guess my question would be, as far as like your presentation PowerPoint, would that be available on your website?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And just give us a day or two. We have to work with our communications team in order to get it uploaded. So just be aware of that. So maybe by Friday. So
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Does anyone foresee any challenges with applying for or implementing this portion of the NOFO? And y'all can feel free to use the chat or come off mute to discuss.
And if you use the Q&A box, you're able to do it anonymously. If that is a concern for you, that's fine too.
Any additional feedback before we move on? Okay, I'm going to move on.
Hold on a sec. The whole purpose of this is for you guys to let us know if there's additional ideas or thoughts regarding this. So just putting that out there. So that's it. Okay. Thanks, Jody. We have a Q&A. Wait a sec.
Yay.
We have a question. Yay. Having to pay up front. So it feels like there's some issues regarding the cost reimbursement piece. So yes, that's a general way that DCA does our grants. You see that in construction, you see that in our ESG grants. There's multiple ways that happens as far as reimbursable. We know for some agencies that capacity piece can be an issue. So if that is a concern, it would be great, so we understand that that's a concern. Let me just say that. So we hear you. currently that's how we have our system set up. But I will take that to our executive team to let them know that there's concerns around that.
Any additional feedback from anyone before we move forward? We are here to serve. And we want you to voice your opinions and tell us how to make this the best program ever.
But we certainly try. We try really hard.
This
This
is
is
Tanea
question.
Strayhorn from Chosen Vessel.
Hey,
So one of the questions I do have is I know that this is not for operating costs. Will you guys, do you know of anybody or any partnerships that you guys have leveraged that will offset those things that you may have already established with DCA?
So that's a great insight. That's actually how HOME-ARP was structured with HUD. So that's how HUD put it together. So that is their choice. That's on them. As far as what we've put together for those operating costs we have for this particular grant, which Jody's going to talk about in a minute, we're adding the supportive services aspect, which can be like case management for new clients, not old clients. There can be basically using paying for new places to live, things like that, that are a part of it that can be included in this particular grant for individuals who are part of the shelter. Okay. We've kind of left the operating piece open, hoping that the agencies would also look into ways to make that happen and leveraging relationships with local governments and local entities in order to make that happen. ESG is an option for this grant. So you can, if you're already receiving emergency solutions grant funding, you can opt in to be an ESG shelter with this particular grant. And so then essentially abide by the ESG requirements. But as far as specific operating costs, we have not put anything aside from DCA's standpoint for this, and have really honestly left it to the agencies to let us know what they could do. We know that this is not the easiest thing, and as you can probably tell, we've kind of released this expeditiously, considering everything going on with the federal government right now. So because of that, I think it shifts the funding as well as far as options. So I think part of this is really great for organizations who have already been operating a shelter, and I think that's what HUD originally was thinking, is basically adding to shelters that already exist in order to offer the non-congregate aspect. So individual rooms with a door and a bathroom. So expanding a shelter or rehabbing a shelter in order to become non-congregate from a congregate shelter. So I think, which already tends to have operating costs because it's already been in operation. So I think that was HUD's intention, which is why the no operating cost piece was included. So, so I know that that's a very long answer to your question, and I'm going to stop there. So, Jody, do you have anything else to add? Because I know that you've been kind of focused on this over the last few months.
I have
no,
a question.
go ahead.
So for operating expenses, can revolving loan funds, CDFIs, things like that, be utilized to acquire funding for operations and then reimbursed through the program?
Oh, Maurice, you got cut off.
Okay, sorry, we have some bandwidth issues here. So revolving loan funds and CDFIs, can those dollars be acquired and then reimbursed by the program to help with those operating costs? That's one question.
That's a good question. We have not considered that, but we will consider that. So yeah, that's a great question.
And then the other, is there a minimum size requirement for these non-congregate shelters? You know, I mean, is there a certain a minimum size that you have to service to be eligible?
Jody, I'm going to give that one to you. I know-
And you're speaking, Maurice, on the size, like project size, we're looking at a minimum of 3 units. There is no maximum. And as far as for the bricks and sticks of the project, HOME-ARP can fund all of that.
Okay, so a minimum of 3
Yes, sir.
families or individual. Okay,
Yep,
that's what I
yes, sir.
needed. That's what I needed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I see someone else has a question regarding what the definition is for a non-congregate shelter. And a non-congregate shelter is a unit that is private, has a lockable door, and a private bathroom within the unit. So where most shelters are congregate, where there may be a huge open area where there's a lot of sleeping areas, cots or mats. This is private, so that a family or an individual can just have privacy behind a lockable door. It's safety reasons. And one of the aspects that HUD was thinking when this was created was, the COVID pandemic, having just that privacy and safety to just kind of, be on your own within, there's so many wonderful reasons for something like this. And we have heard from providers, no one wants to go to a shelter, and it's the privacy aspect. It gives them a little, gives them, I don't know, a little bit more pride to just be alone in that space. You know what I'm saying? Alona, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. With regards to congregate shelters, so basically it's the juxtaposition, and actually it's not how this is actually how HUD defines it. So congregate shelter is a large room where oftentimes there may be several beds or several bunk beds where many households all stay together. And then, as Jody just explained, the non-congregate shelter has a door and a bathroom. The other thing HUD has been really specific around is ensuring that all groups are able to have access to the units. And so that the protected classes, protected groups of people have access. So making sure that able to serve people no matter what their gender. So able to have, because sometimes shelters also are gender specific, just for women, just for men. And this gives an opportunity to expand that definition for shelters, as well as being able to serve families in addition to individuals. So basically, you need to make sure protected classes are taken care of, and that, as Jody said, there's a privacy aspect, and just there's a concept, and I can't verbalize the word. Is not it's going to come to me like after the webinar, but just that pride and being able to allow people their own space, given the difficult situations they're going through. So does the term bathroom include a shower, or can it be just a toilet and a sink with common area for showers? It does include a shower, so it needs to be a sink, toilet, and shower. However, they do not need a kitchen. They can have a communal kitchen of sorts. And so that's the one thing that can be more community oriented. But yes, a full bathroom. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a tub. However, I would recommend that there be accessibility and that consideration and what that looks like for individuals of all abilities to be able to utilize the unit. So that would need to be considered as well. Beans. Good questions, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna just check our Q&A to make sure we don't have any additional. I think we've covered all the chats. So So we hear you about the operating costs. We hear you about this CDFI or rotating loan fund for operations. And so, and what that looks like. So we hear you regarding that. And also, part of this is just ensuring that the community invests in it too, that, we want to see y'all bringing together several groups if that's possible in order to ensure that this is a community built shelter. So that's something to consider as well. So hopefully maybe leveraging some other funding opportunities is really a good direction too. So, okay, Jody, I'm gonna stop talking to you, and I'm gonna turn it back over to you, lady.
Marilyn, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. If no one has any, go ahead, Marilyn.
I'm just listening at this present moment. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. My pleasure.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'll go ahead and move forward with the next section. We're going to discuss the considerations, the restricted use period, the conversion of non-congregate shelter to permanent supportive housing, application attachments, service plan, and then give you another opportunity to ask questions or give us feedback. So the non-congregate shelter options during the restricted use period. HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter may remain as HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter in compliance with the requirements of the notice. It can be converted to permanent affordable housing according to the requirements established in the notice, or be converted to permanent housing as defined in Subtitle C of Title 4 of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So you would have to remain a non-congregate shelter for up to 3 years. And then once you get to that 3-year mark, if you wanted to do the conversion, that could happen. It just has to be something that's in the plans ahead of time, and be in the written agreement if you were to become awarded. HOME-ARP authorizes the conversion of HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter units into permanent housing under Subtitle C of the Title 4 of McKinney-Vento, or permanent affordable housing as described in the HOME-ARP notice during the restricted use period. And again, the written agreement between DCA and the owner of the HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter project must describe a conversion as a possible outcome of the HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter. So if you're even thinking that may be in the plans, you need to put it in that written agreement. Specify the conditions under which the conversion will be permitted, and require that DCA approve any conversion in advance. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Alona, before I move forward?
Okay. No, I was just scratching my head, but actually, let me mention is that the conversion piece, there are different amounts of length of time that you need to operate as a non-congregate shelter, depending on what kind of rehab you do. So just be aware of that if you do like a full new construction or a really big rehab, it's going to be a little bit longer that you need to operate as a non-congregate shelter. And the other aspect too is that transitioning to permanent supportive housing is an option in addition to affordable housing. So it can be either or. However, it would probably be a single resident occupancy situation if you convert it to affordable housing, just because of the way that it's structured. So just be aware of that. So there are options to transition the shelter to something else, but obviously we'd prefer it to be a non-congregate shelter as long as possible. So, but there are those options that HUD put into its requirements, so into its notice. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So when you apply for the non-congregate shelter, there are 9 different attachments that you'll have to submit with the application. And these are listed within the workbook, so no worries, but I wanted to go ahead and address them here. The required attachments are the nonprofit IRS 501c3 or 4 determination, a board of directors list, audited financial statement with management letter from a CPA firm from the most previous year, the most previous audit. MOUs between the non-congregate shelter owner, developer, and any other service providers you may have. Evidence of zoning, site control. You would have to submit your plan for HUD's affirmative fair housing marketing plan. A site map with a 5-mile radius around it for any amenities that may be close by, grocery store, pharmacy, doctor, a Y, anything like that, and preliminary plans for the new construction or rehab of non-congregate shelter. We're going to move on to the service plan. A service plan will be required for all applicants for funding. And like I said, affirmative marketing to the 4 qualified populations. We want to make sure that those that may be the most unreachable are reached, so that they have an opportunity to become participants in the non-congregate shelter. Be proactive on outreach in your community that goes right alongside that. And marketing to and referrals for the 4 qualified populations, which are homeless, at risk of homelessness, domestic violence and human trafficking, and severely housing cost burden households. It's not lost on us. All 4 of these qualifying populations are eligible to participate in the non-congregate shelter. And it's not lost on us that, of course, those that are homeless are going to be the main ones that would be applying for a non-congregate shelter. Are there any thoughts on this section? Anything we need to make sure to keep in this NOFO from what I've just discussed? Go ahead.
I do have one question.
Okay.
Is there a square footage requirement for the individual units? So that if we're putting together this plan, this housing plan, that could possibly get converted into affordable, is there a minimum square footage requirement for that?
There is no square footage requirement at this time. I think it's a good question. Really, it just needs to be, a livable space. We know, in order to have a bed, additional dresser, those types of things. If you're wanting to transition it to affordable housing, we would also consider, making sure that the square footage piece is not too big as well. So making sure that it makes sense for what you plan on doing. We will look at the feasibility of the project, the cost per unit. I think that's a big piece. We try and estimate right around $300,000 or less per unit as far as per unit cost for HOME-ARP. But we also understand that, there's lots of different scenarios as far as the building goes. So we're open to what you propose. But again, we're just trying to use the money and leverage as much as we can. So use it the best possible way. And so depending on what you're asking, we may want reasoning behind certain decisions that you may be making. Obviously granite countertops would probably not be the best choice for for the development. But also making sure that it's good and livable and can last a long time, well past the 10 to 15 years that are required. So I think it just a certain degree of logic and needs to just be applied, which I'm sure Maurice. So so there's no minimum, no maximum, but we will look at the feasibility and cost per unit and things like that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. So if we're looking at doing multiple units at 650 to 800 square feet, that kind of thing. So that answers my
A
question.
little bit
Thank you.
bigger. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone see any challenges with applying for or implementing these items? And again, for if you want to remain anonymous, you can use the Q&A function.
And also, I want to also mention thoughts around the additional attachments. I know in the previous application, there was a lot more required. And we know that for multiple reasons, part of it was just to help agencies kind of put together their own packet for future applications. So that was kind of part of the reason for all the documentation last time. But for this time, we tried to minimize it a little bit. Actually, Jody, if you can go back to that that particular. That's great. Thanks. Necessary. Okay, we have a question. Necessaries are kitchens are necessary, but are they permitted? Are not necessary, but are they permitted? Absolutely. Yeah, you can include kitchens in each unit. And I think that this is a fairly, general list. We tried to keep it practical as possible. If there's any impracticalities a part of this list, please let us know. And I think a new add is the map, which kind of Jody added, which I really appreciate, is, the location of the non-congregate shelter. Like, where is it in the full spectrum of the community? And do they have access to services, and making sure that there's, shopping and doctors and everyone close by. So that's a really, really good add.
Okay. No one has any questions on this? This looks pretty.
Updates? Okay.
So the appendices and post-award requirements. In the appendices, we've got a definitions of all things related to non-congregate shelter. There are property and construction standards in there, and minimum HOME-ARP non-congregate shelter habitability standards, rehab and construction, and the ongoing property standards and inspections. One thing that I noted with the non-congregate shelter was, like, each unit would have to have their own carbon monoxide detector, and then them placed outside of each communal room and in the communal room. The construction submission, it's a little robust. The non-congregate shelter project team would have to submit certain documents to DCA throughout the design and construction stages. Have to adhere to the federal cross-cutting compliance. Environmental reviews apply. Davis-Bacon gets involved if you build more than 12 units. And I see we have a question in the chat already. If the project can be scaled down in cost from what is requested, will you offer to fund a project at a lower level if that is addressed in the grant application so that they are not just disqualified?
I think we need the project can be scaled down. I think, Debbie, we may need a little bit more information as far as what you mean with scaled down. Do you mean the amount of units? Do you mean the size of units?
Yes. Like, if let's say we ask for $2 million, I'm just pulling numbers, to do 12, a 12 unit facility or 2 different buildings. And then in the proposal, we say, if this isn't if this level of funding isn't available, we could use a minimum of this to do 5 units, something like that. Is that something, as long as we address it, that you would consider, or would we just be disqualified because we asked for too much money?
No. Okay, so one of the beauties of this particular application is there's a lot of narrative. So, giving us that full spectrum of, we definitely could use this much money, but if you want to give us this, we can work with that, and this is how. So definitely how you're able to pivot.
Okay.
Because we all know funding structure. I mean, and we would like to fund multiple projects with this funding. It's $7.7 million. So we'd like to get at least 2, maybe 3 projects out of this grant funding. So again, that leveraging is important. And then also, like you were talking about, just the pivoting of what you guys are able to do. But also demonstrating the need is important. So if you're able, so if you are doing 5 units, what the need is in your community and how those units will be filled with 5 versus the 12, as far as keeping up with turnover and such to ensure that everyone's getting served, or if how you're going to fill 12 units versus 5. So if you're definitely make sure that you can fill 5, but you can't necessarily fill 12, then we're going to want to know that too. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
It just depends. So again, just kind of giving us a layout of what you need and why. That data piece is super important. So yeah, just giving us backup, but we want to hear, what you want to do, but also the steps you've made to kind of lay some foundation in it as well, because of everything going on with the federal government. Developments that are a bit more shovel ready, because this would need to be started within the next 12 months once something is written. So we definitely want to make sure that there's a very, more developments that are ready to sign an agreement sooner than later, just because we need to move forward on things. So yeah. So that explain it all?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let you take the next one, Jody.
Yeah, Karen is asking, does Davis-Bacon get triggered by the more than 12 units or by a dollar amount? And it's absolutely, once you hit that 12th unit, Davis-Bacon is going to be triggered.
And not the dollar amount, it's 12
Right,
units.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Our pleasure, Karen.
Absolutely.
Anybody have anything else?
Well, and I was going to mention even like the property standards. If y'all haven't taken a look at the NOFO, that is something that's not going to change because this is a listening session. What you guys are looking at is a draft. We're probably not going to go too far off of what you guys see in front of you. But those property standards are straight out of our regulations. So just know that that is going to be required. So if you have any concerns around those standards, then you need to think about the project within that context.
Thank you for adding that, Alona.
Well, it just because I know we've talked about it a lot. It's just important, just like Jody mentioned, like with the carbon monoxide piece, and those particular something that may not have happened in the past. It may be relevant to this particular development. Do you guys foresee any challenges from what you've heard with I understand the operating cost thing. We get it. The operating cost is definitely a challenge. We hear you on that point. Is there anything else that you guys can foresee as a challenge? Maybe with the application piece, other areas? Also to note, what we're going to do is we're going to have the submissions through emphasis. It's not going to be submitted through ZenGen and ESAVIS. For those of you who have applied for emergency solution grants and or the coordinated the COC continuum of care funding and things, it's mainly going to be just kind of a plug and play, just registering for the site because it's probably a little bit easier to register for, and then uploading all of your documentation, and just we'll need basic information on the website, and a lot of it's just going to be uploaded. So just be sure to be aware of that. And obviously before the due date and time, it would probably be good to upload it maybe a day or two beforehand, just so then that way there isn't issues with uploads. Okay. So we're going to move on to supportive services.
Hand it over to you, Lana.
60 seconds. Take control. Oops. Okay. Any other questions about non-congregate shelter? We can go back and revisit that. What counts as starting the project within 12 months? Breaking ground. So that means starting to build within 12 months of the written agreement. So what would happen is if your application is selected, then we would move into the environmental process, which at this time can take somewhere between 4 months to 6 months, depending on the phase 1, and then moving into then signatures after that. So once HUD approves the development, then we can sign. So it would need to be, things would need to be kind of a little bit more concrete. And being open to paying for, basically the phase 1 for environmental can be reimbursed, but being ready to have that initiated on your part if your project is selected. Which we can pay for afterwards, but again, this is reimbursable. Okay. I think that answers Sarah's question. Okay, let's talk about supportive services. So we also released the supportive services NOFO. We've been traveling with the ESG team throughout this state to talk about the non-congregate shelter, supportive services. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit more. We also have an application webinar tomorrow, which we've been advertising for the past month and a half. So we're not going to not do that. We're going to go ahead and do that too. So this is just going to be an overview of the notice of funding, because we did, again, we expedited the release of these notice of fundings just because of the shifts that have been happening in our government recently. So, I think I'm going backwards. I'm so sorry. There we go. So supportive service awards, the grant minimum is $100,000. The grant maximum is $500,000. Funding to be spent by January 1st, 2030. However, we would love for you to spend it quicker than that. DC and the service provider will establish a written agreement or contract for funding to ensure program compliance, record keeping, and payment processes related to service provisions. So for every amount of funding that we give out, there has to be a contract. And I think y'all are aware of that if you've been doing this before. And if you're new to this, there is a written agreement that we have that has very specific requirements from HUD that we include in that contract. So, and all services that are to be provided must be predetermined and stated in that written agreement. So when you apply for the NOFO, you need to make sure that you let us know what you would like to spend the money on. And we're going to talk about those specifics coming up. So we're going to use the supportive services dollars primarily for two application types. One is to expand our emergency solution grant projects. So if you are an ESG group and you want to do something new and different, here's an opportunity. And so that is that's a really great chance for you to take your program to another level and try something new. This also gives us the opportunity to show the state maybe where we need additional funding in some areas. So if, kind of being able to have some potential pilot projects throughout the state of what you want to do. And so if you look at the list, which we're going to pull up in a little bit, it's including things like childcare and additional financial services and, things like that. So if you want to go in that direction, that's excellent. New projects too. So for those agencies that haven't really received any emergency solutions grant funding or other DCA funding, and you kind of want to move into that direction, this is an opportunity. Now, we do understand that the reimbursable piece is a little bit, maybe a little bit difficult where that's concerned. So I'm just going to say we hear you. And just, so we understand that may be a barrier. So we're figuring that out on our end because that's an accounting issue. But if you can demonstrate the capacity to be able to make that work, which you can show through your narrative, that would be, we have some, since this is still a draft, we're figuring out some pieces with our accounting team to see if we can work out some options. And the needs assessment will be required to show the demand of the service funding requested. So if you are asking for example, I'm going to talk about financial options, like being able to help pay for utilities and rent, having a list of, we've had this amount of requests this month, this amount of requests this month, and show us examples, obviously not with names or, personal information. We do not want any of that. But being able to detail specifically what you've seen in your agencies to show the need would be great. And I see that are there any restrictions on who has to perform the needs assessment? There are not. No. We would like it to be fairly reputable. I mean, you don't have to get another agency. There are a lot of different ways to show need based on different software and programs that are out there and things. So I'm not, don't go out and spend thousands of dollars on a needs assessment. Please don't do that. But you are going to need to show us data, however you choose to procure that. And we can also look it up too on the needs that you have in your community. So there's a lot out there. And so, I would recommend getting started if you have an idea of what you want to ask for, to start looking up that data for it to show proof. Okay. Does that answer your question, Monica? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. Excellent. So nonprofits, like I said, C3 or C4 status, and city and or government, city or county governments are also able to apply. That's it. Thank you. Also, like I said, for expanding those emergency solution grants, new organizations not previously receiving ESG funds. It's really good for you guys to, if you have not received ESG funds, if you could demonstrate at least your past history. So that is kind of important for us to know that you guys have had some experience in the past with disseminating services. So that is a really great, it would be important for them. Okay. So is it possible to provide grantees with an initial draw of funds to use as operating the program at the beginning? There are some other federal funding programs that will do that, and it is helpful to agencies. So, like I was saying at the beginning, Debbie, that's not it's something that we would have to work out with accounting. That's not something we usually do. But we also understand that trying to expand the capacity of agencies and kind of help build up more opportunities in the state of Georgia, we need to look at other types of things. So I think it would depend on if we do front the money. There would have to be a really good example of just the fidelity of how funds are spent, receipts, making sure that we're having all the everything kind of very quickly returned as far as what you've spent and how you've spent it, and making sure that we're keeping up with those particular items, just because that that fidelity monitoring is kind of an important piece too. So there would need to be an exchange there of sorts. And I know you mentioned the other grants also require that the agencies have a bond to cover the advance so that funding is protected. That is great. I'm not personally, I'm not familiar with that. I've mainly done a lot of housing lately. So bonds for supportive services. That's awesome. So if that's a possibility, then we can definitely explore that. So not opposed, but we have to work it out with our accounting team because it would be a change in protocol because typically we do reimbursable grants. So next, Evan asks, can the applicant perform the needs assessment or does this have to be a third party? Is there a specific format associated? The applicant can definitely do the needs assessment. It does not need to be a third party. And is there a specific format associated? There isn't a specific format associated, not at this time. We're leaving it fairly open, but we need to have documentation showing that. So like I said, if you guys have a specific website that you're using, being able for us to access, obviously like census.gov, that's a very, everyone uses that. I particularly like Community Commons, which has a lot of different databases associated with it. So if you guys do the needs assessment, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't need to be a third party. But we just need to be able to verify information that you produce. So, okay. I think I've answered both of those. If not, ask more questions. Let me know if I'm missing something. There can be no preference or limitation for certain populations unless service specific. So, I mean, obviously, there are going to be some, excellent. Thanks, Evan. There are going to be some different services that you may decide to use that are specific toward maybe people who are homeless. So, for example, a very obvious one would be helping someone move into a new apartment, and you help pay for their utilities and getting those started up and first and last month's rent. Clearly, someone is going to need to be homeless or at risk of homelessness in order to receive that particular service. So we technically need to keep it open at this time. We can't be, well, actually for supportive services, HUD has stated that there can't be any preference or limitation. So it can't be just for individuals who are with, who are in a domestic violence situation, or just people who are or households, I should say, who, sorry, lost my train of thought. So it can't be just for individuals who are homeless, for example. So if there's childcare that you choose and you just want to serve homeless individuals, that's not really an option for this funding if it's not associated with a specific housing project, which both are current non-congregate shelter and rental housing. You can add supportive services, like Jody talked about, to your request. So that's the first thing. So you cannot limit our preference, and that's a HUD thing. We've heard that from our technical assistance group. So unless, again, it's specific to the type of funding. So if you are helping people not be homeless, then obviously, the specific population are going to be individuals who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So just, just understand that going in, that if you are, for example, if you're serving veterans, this particular funding has to serve everyone. It cannot just serve veterans. Okay. So that just gives you kind of an idea. So an organization, okay. For the year of experience required for new organizations, what would be affordable housing related service? Can you give an example? And that could maybe be a typo. I actually probably should have taken out affordable housing. Please forgive me for that. We would need to know that you've been providing service provision for at least 1 year. And if you are wanting to do more homeless type services, just as far as being involved with providing individuals with needs who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So specifically to the populations that HOME-ARP is supposed to serve, so the 4 QPs, it would be important that you show a year of experience that you've been working with our 4 qualifying populations, or one of the 4 qualifying populations. So an organization that serves women and their children wouldn't qualify for the funding. You would not be able to serve women and children alone. You would need to be able to serve, individuals. You'd have to be able to serve men. You'd have to serve, all kinds of individuals who are homeless at risk of homelessness, DV and fleeing trafficking, or fleeing DV and trafficking, and then overburden the rent. So you would have to serve all 4 QPs. That's correct. Okay, going back to the list here. First come. Okay, yeah. So they need to be open to all households who meet the definition of our qualifying populations. First come, first serve. So that's been really specific around wait lists with regards to this funding. So it's been kind of interesting, actually. So even for the supportive services, it would need to be waitlisted essentially. But my assumption is that you're going to be serving people as they come in and taking care of them. And so, keeping a wait list as best as possible if needed. So affirmative marketing needs to be made for any supportive services given. A plan will be required to ensure all 4 populations will be made aware of the services. So again, with the needs assessment, you need to show the need in the community. That's something HUD's been really specific around, is that you need to show us why you need this. And also it's good for you guys to know that, because how often have we said, hey, we think we need to offer this particular service, and then you offer the service and then no one uses it. So we need to make sure that, if we're giving you funding for something specific, that there is a need in your community for it. And then on the other hand, also letting groups know that it's available. And so what is your plan to market to your local community about what's going to be happening at your agency? So what does that look like? And the household cannot be already receiving the services through another program. So a great example would be case management. If you're wanting to, utilize HOME-ARP to, take over your case management costs, we can't do that if you're already offering it to serve, to individuals. So we can't take over funding something that you've already been funding, but it can be something new, like we mentioned before. And so, and again, that wait list thing, must be maintained to receive services. So just knowing that we need to make sure that it's first come, first serve, that people are being taken care of one step after another, or one person after another, I should say, household. So here's an example of all the possible supportive services to request. Now these are McKinney-Vento and housing prevention or homelessness prevention services that are noted. And so as you can see, there's a full list in the NOFO, and in the appendices at the end, we have everything noted, and it is straight out of our regulations. And so there can be no question about what's stated, and that's what we can do. And we are going, and also eligible costs associated with housing counseling. So we do have some funding priorities that I'm going to jump into after I answer this question. If they are already utilizing our food pantry, they would not qualify for this program, correct? That is correct. So it would have to be a new program that you would want to do. So if you wanted to add services to the food pantry, maybe offering, maybe utility assistance, offering, first and last month's rent to get people moved into a location. That may be something to consider if you have a food pantry and you've been offering services to individuals for, a good number of years. Because I know that you hear about issues that are going on and, situations that there are additional needs to, food needs. So that may be a consideration for an organization that's a food pantry. So our priorities are going to be homeless outreach support. So we've talked with our balance of state coordinated entry staff, and this is a big one. We really want to increase the regions that are able to have coordinated entry. And so we're wanting to support that and support our coordinated entry team. And so for new areas, this cannot be for areas already receiving outreach funding. So if you want to start moving into starting a coordinated entry system in your community, now it can be a city, it can be a county, or it could be a region. It could be several counties put together, which is a great opportunity to leverage the support and system that you guys have already probably started. This is a great chance to start funding that. And so eligible costs include outreach worker transportation costs, a cell phone, initial assessment costs, crisis counseling, addressing urgent physical needs. So there's a ton of things that can happen with these outreach costs. So if you guys have been considering starting a coordinated entry system in your area, this is a great opportunity to start building on that. Just want to clarify, we have a question. Just want to clarify, if we already have a homeless outreach program that does not have a coordinated entry system, does that qualify? Monica, that is a great question because technically that would be a duplication. So probably not, sadly. Because it would be a duplication of what you're already doing. Monica, what I'm going to say to you there is we're going to have to give you a better answer for that. We're going to have to look into our regulations. And we'll get back to you. We'll post that probably to like a Q&A on our website. So then that way we can get you some more specific information on that point.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Are you Victoria or are you someone else? Oh no,
I'm Tanea.
Yeah, Tanea. And then I'll answer Victoria's question in just after Tanea. Go ahead, Tanea.
Okay, so my question is, could we leverage some of this funding to bring in workforce development sources? So if we had to subcontract, is it possible that we can pay for that through this?
We've not been asked that question. We'll have to put that into a Q&A too that we put on the site. So workforce development. So what I would probably say is if you look at what we can do here, there can be workforce development. I think it's included in here if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look at it again. Yeah, employment assistance and job training. So it's a funding option, but I don't know if you can subcontract that out. So my concern would be your program not administering it. So if you're using another agency to administer that service, I don't know what that would quite look like.
So no, when I mean that, I'm sorry, that probably wasn't the correct wording, but where the people that we are bringing in to offer certain services, so they will be able to actually certify our individuals, whether it's with needs for CNA prep or whatever the actual classes. So that's what I'm saying, but it would be where we would have to pay that entity. And so I was wondering if those funds, could we do it that way?
Yeah, I'm so paying it like a tech school for CNA programs and
Correct.
things.
Absolutely.
I think that could be a possibility. Yeah. So yeah, to pay for someone's development, there's employment assistance and job training. So again, I haven't gotten really specific into that part of the regulations, but my guess is, and you may want to look at it too, it's there in the appendices, um, is that probably, yeah, if it says job training, then yeah, I'm pretty sure that would be just fine for you to pay for a tech school to send people to school. So, does that answer your question? Okay. I'm
Yes, it does.
assuming
Thank
so.
you.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay. Um, so Victoria asked, what if the county or city already has coordinated entry in the area? Then sadly, they would not be able to utilize this funding. If there's already a coordinated entry system in your area, the homeless outreach support would not be able to, you wouldn't qualify for that. So, however, you may be able to qualify for other service, other supportive services funding, just not the homeless outreach support. So I would look into other options that we have on the list for what you're not already doing. Again, they were really specific around not duplicating services. So we're going to be really, we're going to look at that almost granularly just to make sure that we're not going to get dinged by HUD where that's concerned. Because y'all know no one wants to get dinged by HUD. So are you saying that if you are in okay, so another question from Debbie, are you saying if you are in a current coordinated entry region, then agencies cannot apply for any supportive services? No, I am not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you are in a current coordinated entry region, that you would need to apply for other services outside of homeless outreach support. So this would be something that you couldn't apply for, but some of the other things you could. So go ahead, Margaret, you can take yourself off mute.
Yes, and I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive of the question that may have been answered. But for instance, our church, Chosen Vessels of God Ministries, we have a food pantry that we've been operating for years. But the missing piece is people come asking for support for utilities and rent. We cannot offer that piece because we are not funded through any governmental agencies as of yet. Now, is that a piece that we can add to the supportive services?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and one more question, just so I can get clarity. We also do our homeless outreach. We do it out of pocket. The missing piece is there are some individuals, because we've been doing this for so many years, that we come in contact with that we know that we can assist to perhaps get them off the street. So we just need to add that piece of housing because we don't have the funding to do it. Once again, because we're not funded through any governmental agency, we're just taking the monies from our church tithes and offering. So is that a piece that we can add for supportive services?
Absolutely. It's a perfect segue into our next section.
So I knew you were going that way, so that's why I asked.
Appreciate it. Thanks for supporting the program. We appreciate it.
Thank
You're
you
helping
so
us
much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to talk about that right now. Another priority, which our Office of Homeless and Special Needs talked about, was being able to offer financial assistance, and it's two parts. The first is being able to do those rental application fees, security deposits, utility deposits, moving costs, first and last month's rent, and then payment of arrears even. So again, all these specifics are in that appendix. So take a look at that if you want some really specific information on that point. But the other thing too that we can do is kind of in short and medium term financial assistance. So this can go up to 2 years. This is kind of like an alternative to a tenant-based rental assistance program. We would definitely need to make sure that some pieces are in place in order to make this work long term. But this is kind of like an addition to additional rapid rehousing type programs. So those two options are available for funding requests. Again, guys, we would need to make sure that you have that needs assessment taken care of. and that you have the agency capacity in place in order to sustain these kinds of programs, because they can be a bit of a lift. So just know that going in, that we're gonna just try to be aware of that. We want to create opportunities, but we also need to be smart about spending the money. And sometimes that capacity issue, it's really awkward. So we just want to, just look at that, consider that, look at what your agency is doing, look at your past audits and how that, and the fidelity monitoring that you have in house to ensure that that things are moving as they should. So these are great opportunities. I'm not going to deny that. They're phenomenal. But we also want to make sure that this is something that supports, the local area as well as your agency. So we don't want you guys to get, go, I guess, outside of what your capacity is as an agency too. So we want to stretch you, but we don't want to stretch you too far so you break. So, so just know that going in, when you're considering all these opportunities, just what would really work for your agency. And so maybe, taking it to the next level, but maybe instead of asking for funding for like rent and utilities for 100 people, maybe start with 10 or 15. So just think about that, about what your capacity is. Okay, so moving on to the next question. So we are in the final part of our questions for our supportive services funding and other notice and NOFO type stuff. So both of them. So we can even move into the additional questions and thoughts and considerations that y'all have. You guys have been asking some great questions, by the way, and I've been noticing, not noticing, but I've been also adding to my list here of your good questions that we may not have answers to. So. We're taking a pause, taking a beat. And Jody, while you've been going through, I know that you've been kind of, neck deep in all of this. What are some of the things that have stood out to you regarding the funding that you really are excited about? Maybe some of the things that you just want to make sure that we're making sure we're being good stewards of the funding. What's some things that have been highlighted to you while you go through this?
Well, some of the things, even from some organizations we talked through the first time the NOFO went out in 2023, is it being low barrier. Just not to limit your concern, just because someone may, just keeping it real, not turning someone away because they're drunk. I mean, letting them come in and sleep it off. Just really having that compassion for your fellow man, that's one of the big things that really stood out to me. In speaking to other groups as well, last time this went out, just not really, putting yourself in the position of someone who may be coming into a non-congregate shelter, and how imperative it is just for them to be able to maybe have a place to lay down and cry. I mean, that almost killed my soul to think, absolutely, let them have that private room to just, if they need to just let it out emotionally, let it out, and just that privacy piece on it. Absolutely, just giving everyone a chance. We're all human, I love that part about the non-congregate shelter, that, no matter what walk of life, giving them a place to lay their head down. That's just really, I love that portion of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So true.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everyone, Jody. I appreciate you. That is so sweet and so true. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think also just the non-congregate shelter really offers a lot of agencies the ability to, help a really wide range of different people and households and situations, and so it doesn't limit, the situation to a particular group, that you can open it up to, all kinds of people and households. So that's the other nice thing. And I remember, Jody, you talking about, hearing that from, I don't know if it was an agency or on one of our webinars, just, the clinics that we go to with HUD, just about being able to close the door and just being able to have your own emotional space, and not have to be around a lot of other people.
Right.
So that's just, yeah, that's a really, really good point. So consider the low barrier piece, everyone. And also that, that's just a big push for, for all states right now. And I mean, it should be, and HUD is, supporting that too. So low barrier housing first. And if you don't know a whole lot about that, the Interagency Council on Homelessness has some information on that. And there's a lot of information on the Housing First program, in order to, just ensure that everyone gets assistance, and that their situation doesn't, it doesn't limit them, that they're able to really be able to get housing and good quality housing, no matter what their circumstances are. So we have a question here. So for supportive services funding, are we allowed to collaborate with other organizations to apply for the funding? Absolutely. We would just need to make sure that you have a strong MOU. So we encourage partnerships. I think that that's a great potential for y'all. And so definitely collaboration, just again, making sure you have those MOUs, that it's very clear, that there's no confusion, because we would want to ensure that the funding that we give you is not going to maybe potentially be involved in a form of conflict if there's something that does arise for whatever reason. So we would want to make sure that everything is very, clear, and who does what, and how that looks between the two of you. So yeah, so as long as you both have been in operation for a year and at least, and are helping one group of the qualifying populations, that would be great. We have another question. Will you be able to cut checks to both organizations if we collaborate? That's a really good question. I would probably have to check that out. I'm guessing, considering what our accounting program goes through into, that we would have to maybe find a lead agency of the two. The logistics of that, I would probably have to talk with some colleagues on what that looks like. I'm copying your questions, guys. So then that way, that would be an additional question that we would answer. So it's a possibility. I think it would just depend on operationalizing that and implementing it. So, because there's just logistics involved. And it's just the basic things around. If you have one grant number, usually there's one address and like checking account affiliated and things. And so with direct deposit and things, taking one grant number and giving it to two different people, I think would be, again, it's an accounting issue that I don't think that we've really done before at that level. So I'm not quite sure if it's possible, but we can look into it for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's a good question. And we're definitely not opposed to partnerships. It would just be needing to figure out the logistics of it. So, yeah. Okay. Well, let me go ahead and move to the key takeaways and some additional information. So just considers the long-term sustainability. We're really going to want to know, again, the capacity level. We want you guys to be able to expand capacity and take calculated risks. So good risks, but also, something that is something that we can show to HUD that we've been able to expand, but not have issues with, and so that's just considerations. Also considerations during the restricted use period. These funds do need to be spent by 2030. So, what that looks like over the course of the next 5 years, or a little less than 5 years. So that's a consideration. Your operating costs, you can, for the supportive services, do administrative costs with regards to, I think we're saying up to 10%, but, and showing, what those admin costs look like, for your agency, like who you're paying for, the full-time, part-time, kind of what that kind of looks like. Working well with other service providers and just making sure that this is an add to your community, and how those partnerships look like, especially, and then also with non-congregate shelters. Like, what does that look like with letting them all know about your availability, what you have going on? If it's not a part of a coordinated entry system, what kind of marketing tools are you using? Those different things. So making sure that it's well, I guess, resourced as far as funding, but also making sure people are utilizing what services you're giving out, whether it be the non-congregate shelter or supportive services. And then again, those low barrier services that Jody talked about so well and so brilliantly, just making sure that everyone has access to everything that is being offered. So just making sure that everyone knows about it and everyone has access. And so our websites will be updated later this week with all of this information. So Debbie asked, can you give us the link in the chat to register for the workshop tomorrow, please? And thank you. Another great segue. We are connecting. So right now we are going to do a trial. I want y'all, you can do the QR code with your phones if you want, but you should be able to just hover over that and the link should work. Could you guys let me know if you guys can click on that QR code and it links to the website? Someone could give me like a thumbs up or a yep, it works, or clapping of hands, or
yep, it works.
Yay! Okay, so those two places, awesome. Thanks, guys. So if you guys just hover over those two QR codes, I also have a non-congregate shelter application Q&A coming up. So just know that that's coming up too. So we have the application information for supportive services tomorrow. It will be recorded, so that's something for y'all to attend if you'd like. Also, I will be at the Housing Symposium next week. We're doing an application presentation there as well. So if you guys want to go ahead and, even have a conversation or things, we would need to make sure that, see if I can copy. Can I copy it? Oops. Jody, could you do me a favor? Is it possible? Could you see about copying that link and putting it in the chat?
I sure will.
Thanks. So, having a few conversations at the application webinar next week. If y'all are attending the symposium, that's great. So there's that. And then we also have this link here for the non-congregate shelter application Q&A. So once the application is released on Monday or Tuesday, it's going to be early next week. Y'all can start looking at the application, and then we'll have 2 Q&As for you to get some specific answers to all of your questions. So, question about the application, section 2. Complete the overview of project scope for new facility construction. Are you looking for paragraphs of copy or 20 to 30 pages? Okay. First, David, could you tell me which application you're talking about? I'm assuming it's the non-congregate shelter, but I just want to confirm that. Because quite honestly, yes, non-congregate shelter. Okay. I'm going to be honest, a little tired. I've not gotten a lot of sleep. Jody, do you have it?
No, I'm trying to get it. Sorry.
Yeah, I have my supportive services one up, but I was silly and didn't bring up the non-congregate shelter. I'm sorry, guys. That's our bad. Give us a quick second. While you're looking that up, Jody, I'm going to answer the next question.
Gotcha.
Okay. So Karen has to hop off. Okay, there's also another question. If we currently offer homeless outreach to children and families, then families then expand that to include individuals, does that count for supportive services grant? Yes, you have to be able. So if you look at, it just needs to be open to everyone. Yeah, that does count for the supportive services grant. It just needs to be open to individuals. Their main qualifications are homeless, at risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence or trafficking, and or at risk of homelessness, or for burden rent, I should say. So that is their main qualification. So it should be able to serve anyone who fits those categories.
I was just asking because I know that it had to be a new program. And so since we already have existing outreach, but we don't currently serve that population, does that change qualify us to then receive the supportive services funding for that program?
Okay, wait. So so say that again. I'm Monica, I'm a little.
Yeah.
So you already.
So we currently offer like the homeless, the outreach that we're doing is targeted towards children and their families. So if an individual comes, we don't have we don't have a program for them. Excuse me. But through this existing program, if we expanded it to be anybody, everybody, not just you have to have kids,
Right.
would that qualify us to then receive funding?
Yeah.
As an existing program? Okay.
Yeah. But the only thing is that you can't, okay, so the existing program, I would recommend that you do a service outside of what you're already doing, because the duplication of services is a little bit of a.
It's kind of a gray area there because we are offering them, but we're not offering them to everybody, to
Everyone.
individuals.
And you would need to show that you've not provided that particular person the services before. Like it
Those
can't be a
target people.
continuation. Yeah. So like if you had, Jane Doe, who has already been a part of your program receiving case management services, like I said before, you can't suddenly start giving Jane Doe these case management services. It would have to be John Doe coming in,
Gotcha.
a absolutely new person. So it can't.
Yeah, they couldn't have come to us before. So like right now, I have a mom and her kids. We're going to help them with rental support, help them so they won't be come homeless, they're facing eviction. But I often get John that comes, he's by himself, no family, no nothing. He needs rental support. I can't help him.
Right.
And now if I expand it to help John, that would count?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm about 80% positive on that point, Monica. I'd have to again look at those regulations just to make sure, because they talk about non-duplication. And that if it's the type of what you're doing or if it's the people. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a very thin line there. So
because it is the people. We would be offering the same type of service, but not to the same type target population. We have not been able to offer it to individuals yet.
Yeah. I think what I'd wanted to do is just make sure that you're not using a HOME-ARP to kind of like, kind of take over for what you've already had, like supplant funding in order to, to move money around in order to do something else kind of thing.
For sustainability, to sustain the program.
Right. So that you're using the HOME-ARP money to like really kind of build on what you already have going on. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is not using it to move things around, but to grow, I guess.
Do something new.
Yeah. So
if you could let me know, I feel like it would be growing, but yeah, if you let me know, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I'll post that. That's part of all of our questions. So that's great. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
You too. Um, okay. Next. We already have those. Thanks for posting those, Jody. And
Pleasure.
here's all of our information. So the questions that we have, so to go back to the beginning, using CDFI rotating loans to fund operations, additional operation support and what that could look like for non-congregate shelter, the square footage requirements, and having, the development at 650 to 800 square foot per unit. Clarifying if we already have a homeless outreach program that does not have a coordinated entry system, does that qualify? So like your privately funded homeless outreach, if you can start using outreach funding for that, subcontracting of sorts. So how to pay for workforce development. So maybe more of obviously paying directly to the technical school, but kind of what that looks like. And I think the subcontracting piece is a good question. For supportive services funding, are we allowed to collaborate with other organizations to apply for the funding and then being able to cut checks to both organizations? And then the same type of service, but to different populations. I think I got all those questions. So these are great questions, everyone. Thank you. Good listening time. So technically we have another 30 minutes. I think we wanted to make sure we had enough time to talk about both of the grants. Oh, thanks, Jody, for bringing up the section 2 question about the application. Section 2C, complete overview of project scope for new facility construction. Are you looking for paragraphs of copy or 20 to 30 pages? To be honest, David, really, I think we're looking more for paragraphs of copy. I don't think we need what probably is going to happen is we would like to know what you want to do. And then if we want the 20 to 30 pages, we can access that later. So I think I would default to something that's comprehensive and thorough, but not 30 pages. I hope that makes sense. But if we need to get more information, we can have access to those 30 pages later. So after you submit. So I hope that kind of better explains it for your question around the submission aspect. Okay, great. Yeah, so yeah, just make sure it's comprehensive and thorough. If there's any particular challenges that you think we should be aware of, letting us know, but as well as the opportunities, we need to know the good stuff too. And then, yeah, and then just if we want more information, we'll just ask for it. Like I'm trying to figure out how many ways to say that particular statement. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to probably stay online for the next 10 minutes or so. If anyone has any additional questions, probably to about 12:15. We'll go ahead, and we know y'all have a lot of stuff going on. So if there's any additional questions that you have, you can go ahead and stay on and ask, or if you really want to hang out, it'll be recorded. So if you guys want to hop on YouTube and check out the last few minutes of this, you absolutely can. But we'll be available here until, if you all leave and log off, then we'll end everything and be finished there. Thanks for so the sign up form. Oh, that's the MailChimp. Thanks, Jody. Great. If you guys, you probably are here because of the listserv, but if you have friends, family, other partners that haven't signed up for the listserv yet, Jody went ahead and put that link in the chat. It'll allow you to sign up for our regular mailings that are going out. And so that's a great opportunity. And also we put at the beginning, if you go to the top, we have, and actually what I'll do is I'll put the public comment form at the end as well. So this is a repost for the public comment. So if you guys have things that you want to let us know, that's a great way to communicate with us too for the listening session for supportive services and non-congregate shelter. We have a question come in. Please explain the project team qualification determinations for upcoming LIHTC round. So if you are a tax credit developer, there is a qualification form that you need to complete in order to actually apply to build tax credit developments. So you need to show that everyone meets all the qualifications. So there should be a form that needs to be submitted by the 14th of March, I think it is, for the 9% round. So that is what that is in reference to. And I have not been involved in tax credit development quite to the level that I am now, considering all the rental housing stuff. So so I'm going to answer those as best as I can. And you're absolutely welcome, Debbie. Yeah, do you guys have any questions about rental housing? I know a few of you may be on from rental housing applications as well. So we can answer a few of those questions too. Yeah, this has been I don't know if y'all can tell, but Jody and I, and eventually Candace, we're going to help her. You know, she just got into the fold. So we are big fans of this funding. We just love the fact that it can build some really great stuff, give supportive services just for individuals who oftentimes things are income based and not necessarily housing status based. So that's why we love this funding. Oh, great. Okay. So Debbie, it's great. And I hope y'all have a great day too. And I look forward to seeing you at the conference too. So thanks for saying that. We're going to be on for another few minutes. So, but yeah, this funding is it's really special. So I'm a big fan. So yeah, we want it to be a bit more, I guess, paced with it, but considering how things have gone down in the federal government, we want to make sure that we release everything as much as we can, just to ensure that it doesn't get shifted. So, okay. So Candace, I know that you've been looking at some of the supportive services funding. Is there anything specifically that stood out to you about supportive services funding?
No, honestly, not at this time. There's still things I'm still trying to understand and clarify. So, but just kind of glad to see everybody engaged in the program, and the possibilities with it is great. And I'm hopeful that it will be spread across the state and used by everyone. And also those entities that have never used it or consider it will consider at least trying to learn about the program. So if they don't get the funding this time, at some time in the near future, they would do the same.
That's a great statement. Yep, I totally agree. What a great group. Okay. Well, you know what? We'll give it another minute. About 7 additional people on. You guys really don't have anything else to ask. We can go ahead and end our time together. And oh, okay. Well, guys, at that, thank you for being a part of this. Oops, cancel. Switch presenters, select us. Okay, well, I'm not going to do that because it just freaked out. So guys, we're going to go ahead and end this for the day. I hope you have a great Wednesday. Oh my gosh, it's March 12th. Can you believe it? We are well into 2025. And so, yeah, if we see you at the conference next week, awesome. And you guys have the contact information for the forums for public comment. You have a way to access us for the MailChimp sign up form in order to get our updates. And I think we can't possibly give any more information right now. I think we're all tapped. So, so thanks for taking time to spend with us, and we'll talk to you soon. Tomorrow, actually, we will talk to you all tomorrow for the Supportive Services Application webinar. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, y'all.